Welcome to the CRA Corner Podcast. I am Anna-Liisa.
And I'm Milas, and we're two former CRAs talking all things clinical operations. Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the CRA Corner Podcast. I'm so glad today that I actually get to have Anna-Liisa back because she was on holidays for 2 weeks. So I'm glad that we get to do our regular episodes for the podcast where we discuss everything and anything related to the CRA role. So welcome back, Anna-Liisa, with a ton.
Thank you. Slight ton.
More than I get. Nice. So today, Anna-Liisa and I picked a topic that we think it's extremely important and practical to CRAs, and it's top 5 systems technology systems, of course, that CRAs uses on a daily basis. And Anna-Liisa, what's the first system that comes to mind that you would use on a regular basis as a CRA?
So if somebody says the systems, then by default, I think everybody is now using eCRF. It's like the stamp thing and a tool that has been there, I think the longest actually. I think it's the oldest tool. But I think the most undervalued is TMF and document management. Okay, I might be biased as well, but it's still, I think it's really undervalued of the, what is actually the value of a TMF and what it actually performs. So I think it's these two, I would say.
Same to me. Let's put it this way. Top 5 software systems that I would use as a CRA, and then maybe we can go just discuss them one by one. First that comes to mind, I totally agree with you, EDC or eCRF. Top number 2, definitely for me would be the ETMF. I totally agree with you. I might be biased as well, not by obviously Menken Trials, but by using so much the ETMF to keep up to date and to keep in control with the documentation. Top number 3 for me is the CTMS. Then IWRS.
Yes.
I used to have the main one, the Rave IWRS, and I think we use it on a continuous basis. RTSM, how was it called? After the IWRS, what top 5 would be communication and collaboration tools. We needed so many systems to connect and to keep communication with our sites that we had several systems, and every single CRA would have different systems. Yeah. So if we go back to number 1, tell me about your experience with the EDC or with the eCRF. What systems did you have? How would you use them? How did you love them? Tell me about it.
Yeah, so I think it's extremely relevant that the first time when I tried out any kind of eCRF was in 2016. So it's already the user experience is totally different.
It's been a decade.
Yeah, but definitely the core was metadata. I would say 70% of sponsors did use metadata, or they basically bought the metadata option from our CRO. But I also had Oracle, which was Inform. I think it was Inform name. And there was a third one as well. Oh no, what was that?
I only had Inform and metadata.
I had the third one as well, but now I'm totally blanking on what it was. But it was also used less. Definitely metadata was the number one and that we used a lot. But my experience, even at that time, I think us as Millennium, we were not really born with phones and computers, but we still were quite young when we got them.
Yeah.
And then also coming from Estonia, which is really now called as maybe in Silicon Valley of Europe, because we have such an advanced technology country and government. And it was, to be honest, not extremely is too much to say, but it was still difficult to understand where I could find something or what we need to enter, where. So I remember I was still using manuals, which is, I think, today's world, it's quite unusual to use manuals because it should be intuitive and really logical. But we still were using the manuals. And of course we had I think quite a lot of companies actually had the grayish, bluish version of Medidata, not the one that is shown on the website.
Not colorful or fun.
Yeah, nothing like that. So we did, it was indeed really like grayish and really bluish colors, and it was really like not really indicating what you need to do where. So it was a little bit difficult or time consuming. Of course, it might have changed over the years now, even for the low grade ECRA from theirs. But it was definitely the most used, and I to be honest, I liked Oracle more. Or I know there is there is division between who likes more Medidata and who likes more Inform. But I do like Inform because it was colorful. That was the only tool that had colors, and it was for me easy to understand if something is completed or not, and if I need to have query like. The way that they had built it up, it was more intuitive for me and more easy to follow. So, but I know there are people who hate Inform as well. So,
I totally get what you say, and I think I had the same experience as you in terms of the systems I used, and I also started being a CRA in 2016. So it was also a decade ago. Now, as time went by, of course, we had more systems that were added to the toolbox of CRAs of monitoring, but mainly I had those two. Medidata Rave and the Inform EDC. I absolutely agree that I loved the Inform system because of the colors, and the colors made it easy for you to understand where do I have to pay attention and where perhaps I can put it on a priority number 2. And that made our monitoring a lot easier.
And I think it's also like psychological that once you saw everything green, you felt like, okay, I'm done.
It's done.
Like, it's just like it gave the satisfaction.
I can rest.
That, So I think it was also like psychological that you had the satisfaction that came from Inform.
This is a completely random thought and reflection. I was thinking how in the last few years, CRAs have just naturally taken this approach of focusing a lot on SDV, and we focus mainly on getting that data monitored. Now, of course, the job of a CRA is not just that, or it shouldn't be just that. However, because of the way we're trained by the CROs or sometimes even by the sponsors, or the focus on, do you have data backlog? Do you have, you need extra monitoring visit days? Can you just do these all within 1 month? So there's a lot of pressure to get that data monitored so that you get to that green state. And when you get that green state, it's when you kind of get this feeling of satisfaction of, I've done my job. Now I can rest, I can ease. Yeah. So I even wonder if part of the problem is even the systems themselves showing us that green of telling you you're done. It's done. You can now relax about it. You don't have to think about it. And that also adds, obviously, not just the systems. There's no just one element at guilt in here. It's a combination of multiple things. But there has to be certain elements that pushed CRAs into only focusing on SDV and SDR and forgetting about the elements that surround and still are monitoring.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, like as you said as well, really well at the beginning, that if you had some backlog, everybody was hustling you.
Yeah.
But nobody's hustling you about if you have 2 years of backlog in TMF for some reason. Or that you have not completed IP accountability in IWRS. Okay, we had still paper-based, but now it's online. But like nobody's hustling you about backlog and these things. Yeah. But this year...
Or Anna-Liisa, nobody asks you, how's your relationship with the study coordinator? No. Anna-Liisa, I know that this specific site you have in Tartu, I know it's extremely hard because this PI has a history of being very unreachable. How's it going? How are you building this? Can I help you? Can I support you in building that relationship? Nobody asks you that.
No. No.
And then you're left focusing on what you can a little bit more easily do to meet those KPIs or meet those performance reviews that is expected of you, which is how many pages did you monitor?
Yeah, and that's so true. I actually, like, when I became a clinical lead, because I had the CRA background, and I knew how basically like I was first a CRA and then right away clinical lead, so I had like back-to-back experience, and indeed we didn't have anybody in that sense supporting us. You only just receive like your backlog or like your what you need to call because of lab samples were missing or like whatever. But what I did indeed, because of that like lack of communication even with the study team or the connection with the study team, as a clinical lead, I actually started to send out like weekly emails to the CRA, like just like one-on-one. And when they had queries closed or they had something completed, I just like, well done, you did so well, let's continue to do that. And
encouraging.
That's actually, I did receive multiple occasions from line managers feedback that thank you so much for doing this, because it's really like encourages them rather than me saying that, oh my god, you still have 10 open queries, why haven't you resolved, rather than saying, okay, you resolved 5, good job, let's do like additional 5 maybe this week, and like basically encouraging them and
positive reinforcement. Absolutely. This is a very random comparison, and I am known, by the way, to always reach to comparisons that are terrible. So it might be a terrible comparison I'm going to do right now, but it comes to it. So of course, over coffee that we're having, the first coffee of the day, I'm going to leave it out there. Some of the first jobs that I had while I was in university, obviously it was at a shop, so we were selling certain items, and I remember that there are some clients and customers that are super nice to you, and then they will come with a great attitude, with a positive attitude, and then some customers that they just maybe had a bad day, and it's obviously completely natural. But I would remember also how my attitude will also try to mimic the behavior or the attitude of the customer, right? So then you become better at what to do because of engaging even more and feeling more engaged with the customer, and then you absolutely sell more just because your sort of attitude and your energy is matching the customers as well. So I think for CRAs is the same sort of. If I have several PIs that I work with, if I have several team leads that I work with, several PMs, depending on who I can build more trust with, a better relationship with, I can engage more with, just naturally I want to keep that great relationship. So probably just unwillingly, I will just try to do a better job.
Yeah, definitely. It helps. So even if you like feel that you're forced to, in that sense, it's like not naturally coming from you. Like us Estonians, we are not really like, oh, you were so nice. Like it's not really common for us to do this kind of thing. But I knew that if I do that or like basically endorse the person, will help me in return. Yeah. Not only them, but also me.
Great. And that is also a tip I think that we can take as CRAs towards our sites.
Yeah,
it really is. I think because we are a site. It might be that our role is not called a site manager, but from the perspective of monitoring, of readiness of the site and of the data documentation, we do that. We are sort of site managers. So if you take that also attitude of reinforcing positively your sites, of encouraging them, of not only reminding them what's pending for them to do, but lead with what they have done well, what extra step they did, the effort they took that week in order to meet your deadlines, to respond to your email with that missing document too. Speaking of the EDC, we're still in top system number 1. Speaking of the EDC, if they did enter the data in time, if they did respond to the queries, maybe you still have 1 or 2 that haven't been resolved, but for the other 59 that they did respond, congratulate your sites, encourage your sites, appreciate your sites.
They are more willing to also work on your studies if you have this kind of a relationship. So they will make you priority compared to the other studies.
Exactly. Now moving on to the system, top system number 2, which is the ETMF. Now I have to say, hand in hand for me, nowadays when I think of ETMF, I also think of eISF. What's your thinking?
I think they should be the one. Like when we started to discuss about what a TMF should be and what it is. So already actually it happened in 2020. Yeah. So we just started not had done anything yet, but we just started to discuss what actually TMF, and for us it was by default already embedded in there because it is part of TMF. It should be there. not two separate systems.
Absolutely. I agree with you. And I like to think of it as a mirror with two sides, right? Sort of the documentation should be in both and should match, should have the same quality, should have the same approach of filing, and should be auditable, and should be all of those great things that they're always inspection ready and audit ready. But of course, certain documents might be available in only one and certain documents only in the other one, especially when it comes to patient identification, patient documentation, and those are the things are not unnecessary. Those are the things that shouldn't be in the ETMF. And then there's a lot of unnecessary things that we have in the ETMF and we don't need in the eISF. Now, speaking of ETMF and eISF, Anna-Liisa, I want to bring up one topic that I'd love to discuss with you. Every ETMF and eISF has the section of miscellanea. So this was always my nightmare section in the ETMF and eISF, because in that miscellaneous section, I got to learn that we just file documents that usually we just don't know where to put them.
Yeah, to be honest, we didn't use that, and we do not use. Yeah,
No
like
way.
we had the section, but we didn't file anything in essence into that, because we needed maybe few things, but even for now, let's when we're doing now TMF and eISF, we do not have this kind of thing. Everything needs to have a section. If that's not defined in CDRC, maybe you have I don't know, really specific study that is using whatever, like some kind of committee that is never defined in CDRC, then we just create that section and they still will have that location, but we do not have this kind of like drop everything into one location and forget that, because I think it doesn't actually well run as well with inspectors, because they still feel like there should be a certain location and you know exactly where to look that for.
Absolutely. And you know, I love that you said that, because the way that we train CRAs within our community nowadays is very different from how I was trained 10 years ago. Because back then, I promise you, Anna-Liisa, the miscellaneous section was extremely used, and it was this thick. And every single document, you wouldn't know where to put it. You would just put it in there because you knew it was important, but you just didn't really know where it would fit. So I remember we would put in there some note to files of explanations. Every note to file should be related to something, right?
Section,
whether it's to a document, to a procedure, to an assessment, to a missing, it has a relationship. So because it maybe wasn't directly, we didn't know where, we would find 10, 15 note to files in the miscellaneous section, or emails, communication that would be put in there because you didn't find or you didn't think of, let's put it within the communication or relevant communication section.
Okay.
So the way we train now our CRAs is by saying, okay, of course, sometimes, most of the time, CRAs are not involved in the study at study design. When a study manager, for example, comes to you, Anna-Liisa, and says, Anna-Liisa, I want to use Menken ETMF or ISF, and let's build it together. Usually, CRAs are not involved that early. But if you have the chance and you can be involved that early, ask for the miscellaneous section to be completely removed. Because I bet you, I assure you, every document you would put in there would have a section where to be filed.
Yeah, of course. And that's really, I hope that the TMF providers currently that we like are in the industry don't have this miscellaneous, because it's not defined in CDRC, like TMF metrics. And if TMF providers actually provide something like that to you, that's, I would say, a red flag, because everything should have, and like even for the inspectors or auditors, if I would be an inspector auditor, I would be
totally
not really like angry, but still like
not happy,
pissed off that somebody didn't actually take the effort and actually try to file it in correct location.
I cannot think of one document that should only be in the miscellaneous section. I cannot think of one.
Yeah, and we have never had like a problem with that. So I don't know. I don't actually know.
So I would say my top tip when it comes to ETMF and eISF, and I think we absolutely agree on that, is avoid using miscellaneous section if you can. Take the extra step of thinking this document has to be in some other more related section that helps us tell the story of that clinical trial. And miscellanea doesn't tell a story. It just tells specific little episodes segmented one by one that does not help you understand and get the full story and journey of the study.
And actually another thing that we now have implemented actually is getting rid of note to files. And we actually did get rid of note to files of a study, and that was inspected. So it was inspected by 3 regulatory inspectors.
Yeah. How did it go?
They didn't mention it from the start when we set the study up. I said to the study team that let's try just to have do not file note to files for core documents that should be, but that are not applicable for your study just because of X, Y, and Z. But actually we have the index or the EDL, basically document list, and let's add there a reason why these are not included.
Yeah.
Do not create the note to files, but rather actually let's explain there. And let's have a look what's going to happen if an inspector or auditor comes. And we did have 3 regulatory inspectors from 3 different countries came onto the study. And nobody commented on that. And they are
amazing.
One of the regulatory inspectors is IQV is so afraid of that person, and even she didn't comment on that. So
nice. I absolutely can imagine how not having note to files is another great behavior to implement in your clinical studies. And that brings me directly into the third system, I would say. CTMS, Anna-Liisa. I'd love to learn from your perspective, because you were not only a CRA, then you were a CTL as well, a lead. So tell me about the CTMS. Tell me about your experience, your thinking about it. What did you love? What did you hate?
Pointless tool. Totally pointless tool. I know that there are companies who make use of it a little bit better than I think we did. But it doesn't have any value. It just stores not structurized data.
Yeah.
And when I was responsible for a study to look countries and look sites who could perform, it was so difficult to find the information, and it was extremely difficult to understand whom or what countries we should include. But also from the CRA's perspective, I used it solely for the sake of submitting my reports. Nothing else. And when I hear people saying that CTMS is like eISF or ETMF, and I'm like, how come? How do you see that in that way? Because, okay, I understand. Yes, we also had the core documents, some of them there, like protocols or investigative brochures, but it was so messed up. It was just there is no structure. There is no, nothing that could actually help the people who work for the study to be more effective. For me, I don't know, maybe, of course, I'm maybe saying too bad, and there is actually good CTMS, but I haven't tried it. So I don't know, but that was for me the most pointless tool that I have seen.
My experience relates to yours completely, because I used it as a CRA, of course, and I hated having to log into CTMS just to submit my draft of the monitoring visit report. And maybe when I was assigned to the study, I would look through, because maybe the contacts for the site and the contacts for everybody was in there. So I would get those contacts out into my own trackers or into my own notes, and then never again. And the difficulty was, because I never again used that system for anything else than submitting my reports, I would never think of, we have a backup study coordinator, let me also update it in the CTMS. So it was we ended up with a CTMS that was absolutely not up to date in helping CRAs to keep track of our site staff or the movements or who's our contact, because we just did not update it.
Yeah, and to think that usually the sites are being used for years and years in different studies and nobody updates that. So it's like, it's pointless. So it's...
Absolutely. System number 4, IWRS. I used IWRS on a continuous basis opposed to the CTMS. So I put on CTMS as top number 3, but I have to say I used it much less than IWRS. IWRS, I would use it to prep monitoring visits, to check again when I would be at the monitoring visit, to look at the reports of follow-ups, to look at what's missing, when should we get new shipment of the medication, or how the patient was assigned to the treatments, or how did you use IWRS?
To be honest, we then had a very bad version of IWRS because we didn't have any kind of that. It was just like, it had just the shipments there, which you could see if the site has acknowledged or not, and that was pretty much it. And we didn't, at our time, we didn't have any kind of accountability there. So, yeah, it was like, I did use it, but I think I used it a month, max 30 minutes or something like that. Yeah.
My experience was quite the opposite, because in the RTSM that we used, we had not only, we were randomizing our patients, so we were getting assignments of the numbers and the cohorts and the treatment, if it was blinded or unblinded. If you were the unblinded CRAs, you would see more. If you were the blinded, you would see less. Then we would have status of the medication, status of the kits, status of if you had to do an order reshipment, for example, because you were running low on supplies. And sometimes they were automated, but then you would know, the PI or the study coordinator would be on holidays by the time it will be triggered automatically. So let's order it before. So we could do that. Or we would check, get a report from IWRS on the accountability and then compare that at the pharmacy with the pharmacy's accountability. So we did do that. And that was at the same time that you did a decade ago.
Yeah. Actually, maybe even used it way less even, because I remember when it became relevant was when I wanted to return the shipments.
Right.
Then it became relevant for me. But because everything was printed out, the sites were on paper-based, I didn't go into that much. Because the shipments were on paper, I could check from there, accountability was on paper, everything was on paper. We didn't have this fancy ideas.
Well, see how you can get different experiences based on the system that your study is using. Because just IWRS is not the same if it's one provider or another. So depending on the provider you get, and hopefully your sponsor really looks through the systems that are out there, and we don't choose just based on budget, which is also based on what we can do in the system, how much it supports us and how much it helps us to be more efficient. And you get to have tools that actually make a difference. Yeah. And that takes us to the last group number 5, which is not less important. Actually, to me, is very important, but we left it for the end. Tools for communication and collaboration. Because as CRAs, we kind of work on a remote environment, meaning even if you're in the office, you still have your site staff being locally somewhere else in a site, in a hospital, sometimes not even in your city. Or you have your study manager globally somewhere outside of the office as well. So what would be the top tools that you would use in order to communicate and to collaborate?
Yeah, for me, because of the amount of visits, I didn't have much time to do any reach outs during the, between the visits. And because of, I think it's really... And in Estonia, I know that a lot of countries are using WhatsApp, for example, but we do not use it here. Or because the main thing that I used is email, and if there's something really critical, really urgent, then I just phoned. So that was basically 2 methods of me communicating between the visits, but I didn't do it much as well. Somehow it worked for me and my sites that we were able to manage everything during the visits mostly. And we somehow
and that makes sense, especially Anna-Liisa, when you go very frequently. and you keep that relationship frequently. And, there's nothing better than in-person relationship building. Nothing. That in-person communication, in-person discussions, and solving any issues or any findings that you might have. But when it comes to CRAs who to visit that site every 8 weeks, that's 2 months. Or I even had observational studies that I only went on site once every 6 months. So of course there has to be some sort of tool that helps you keep in check, helps you keep that relationship with the site. Otherwise, your PIs will disengage, and you might even have a disappearing, absent completely PI, and that's the last thing that you want to have on a study. So I agree with you. My email was on fire. It would be 100 emails a day, I promise you. It from sites, from sponsors, from study coordinators, from my study managers, a day, 100. Then we would have phone calls. Even though you try to establish this relationship of, if it's urgent, please call me. But if it's not urgent, please don't call me. Just send an email. You would still, it's easier for the site sometimes when they sit at their table at their desk to just pick up the line, the landline, because sometimes they don't even use a mobile phone and just ring you, because it's in their many sites. And again, we're speaking about 10 years ago, but I would say we still have these behaviors nowadays still. You mentioned WhatsApp. I use that with my sites because
I know. Yeah, I think in Central Europe is using quite like a lot of that. Yeah. Also from the like older generation as well.
Of course, because I'm past 30, so of course. I didn't mean you. Of course I'm using WhatsApp. I was a CRA a decade ago. But the thing is, I loved to have something that would instantly let me check in with my sites. Now, the problem is WhatsApp is not a compliant tool.
Oh, yeah, tool.
It's not a tool that it has an audit trail. It's not a tool where you can make decisions. It's not a tool that will keep your data safely secured. And I promise you, I've had in the last 5 years twice my identity stolen from potentially tools that I use out there, social tools, can be WhatsApp, can be LinkedIn, can be anything else. Wow. I don't know, where somebody will just take your picture and can reach out to your contacts. So absolutely, WhatsApp is in the industry-wide not considered a compliant tool. And therefore, we should have never used WhatsApp to communicate with our sites. Yeah. However, that only showed you that there was a need we need to communicate with our site on a more instant basis, quickly, reachable, without bothering you, so that you can check it whenever you can. And we did not have another better option.
Yeah, you said like unsecure, like they're like still actually, if you think about that, people are still using it, and all of the other tools that just to get the work done, basically. And that's so, like, in a sense, sad. I'm all pro, and I understand why people are doing this, but it's so sad that nobody is listening to them and actually, like,
absolutely
how industry wants this kind of things.
Absolutely. And, then I've seen several vendor providers trying to come up with solutions, and they would add a chat into the ePro, or they would add a chat into, I don't know, ETMF. I've even seen that. But it doesn't help, because you would still have to log into a system that's on desktop, and then you would have to, you get an email when you get the notification to log into the system and chat. It doesn't help. It
doesn't. True.
But in a nutshell, I know we took longer than we usually would have loved to, but speaking about systems is very important, because these are sort of the layer of system that we use as core for CRAs to do our job. Now, on top of these is where we're now bringing all of the AI features that is helping us to keep more oversight, or to keep more in touch with our sites. And I think we're going to see an amazing wave of systems that are implementing these AI features. And I really look forward to having another discussion on what are these AI features or AI systems that now we can use in monitoring. I hope this was interesting. If you are a CRA, I hope that you can relate to our experiences. I hope that if you're a CRA now, you can even have better tools that helps you even be more efficient and easier at your job. If you're not a CRA, I hope that this at least gives you an idea of what are the systems that you would be using. If you're interested in how they look, you can always Google, just simply Google EDC and just go to images and you'll see, at least you'll get a tangible visual of how these systems look like. And in the next episodes, we're going to bring some amazing topics, and one of them included, of course, AI and the use of AI in the clinical trial monitoring, especially for CRAs. Anna-Liisa, thank you for another great discussion, and until next episode.
Thank you.